and consent to sever. In person at Ben Franklin Place, 101 Center Point Drive. We're also remote participation by video conferencing for our registered speakers. We're live streaming on YouTube and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public. My name is Fabian Poulin. I'll be chairing today's hearings and you can address me by my name or as chair. And with me are my fellow panel members, Jay Baltz, George Barrett, Heather McLean, and Julianne Wright. The procedure for the hearings will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen from time to time are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, I may deal with the agenda items in a different order. Panel members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll deal on any oral submissions relating to the application. As part of the statutory notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. They also had to confirm in writing that they did so, or they'll need to swear or affirm an oath today and they'll be that they have fulfilled the sign posting requirements. Otherwise, we may have to adjourn or postpone the hearing. The panel may ask for a brief presentation of an application followed by questions for the applicant and city planning staff. We'll then hear from members of the public who have registered to speak and may also have questions for them. Finally, applicant who has the burden of proof will have the opportunity to make the final comments and reply. Please address your comments to me as the chair, starting first with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at my discretion. At the end of the hearing, the panel may either make an oral decision or we may reserve our decision, which means it won't be delivered today. In each case today, on each application, we'll be reserving our decision and deliberating after the hearing is done. In either case, we will, within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all parties and participants and anyone else who has requested a copy. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure we'll be following today? We have several applications here today, but we first have to deal with some preliminary procedural issues. Are there any declarations of interest from any panel members?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a conflict of interest on item 6.
Okay, we'll ask you to excuse yourself at that time. Thank you very much. We now have confirmation of minutes of previous hearings. I would like to ask the panel to approve minutes of June the 6th and minutes of June the 20th. First of all, June the 6th. All those in favor?
I've read them and there are a couple of errors in them. Please bring them up. In what was item 2, the 3954 Shirley one. This is minor, but under oral submissions summary, the word although should be struck in that paragraph that begins Robinson. And in number 3, under oral submission summary, the interior side yards are noted incorrectly. It should be 0.6 struck out and 2.1 struck out for the 2.3. But other than that, no corrections.
With those changes, all those in favor of approving these minutes of June the 6th, please raise your hands. Now, minutes of June the 20th. Are there any issues with respect to those minutes? No. I'd like to ask the panel to approve those minutes as written. Please raise your hands if you approve. Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Okay, so the committee has received 2 requests for adjournment today. One will have to deal with those first, and we'll deal with item number 2, 18 Rothwell. Mr. C. Jalkotsky. Are you available? Or are you online? Mr. or Ms. Jalkotsky, are you available?
I'm online here. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Nice to see you, sir. We have a request by the planning department for a adjournment of this application. I'd like to ask the planning department for a brief summary of your request. Oh, somebody online again? Planning department, are you online?
Yes, I am. I'm Evod Rogasuri. I'm here to talk about 18 Rothwell, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So we've reviewed the application, and we seem to address the height issue. But when we looked at the environmental impact study, we decided that this cannot be moved forward because they haven't really met one of the 4 tests. This is on a slope terrain, and there's no other opportunity to deal with this issue, as the building code services doesn't look at these studies. So this is the only opportunity that we have to address this, and yeah, that's our position.
Okay, so you're looking for 2 items, an
Yes.
environmental impact study as well as
the slope stability report.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have any comments, Mr. Jakalts, or do you agree with this adjournment request?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't agree with the adjournment request. I think I sent you a note with regards to the rationale why we felt that the adjournment request wasn't necessary at this point in time. And the 2 reasons are quite simply, number one, the height variance bears no relationship at all to the need for, or would have no effect on an EIS, environmental impact study or a slope assessment study. I did also send you the quotations from the official plan that say that under 564 natural heritage overlays, development or site alteration proposed in or adjacent to a natural heritage features shall be supported by an environmental impact study. It does make no reference. So for example, if we didn't require a variance for height, this same study would be required for the building permit. And I think somewhat erroneously, staff and the city said that no, EIS would not be required for the building permit. And it most certainly would be. I've had that occasion in the past already myself. And secondarily, I mean, staff are quite clear in their report. They've indicated that they are okay with the height variance. They don't make any reference to the environmental impact study having any effect on the potential of approving or disapproving of the variance. And I would submit to the committee that 2 pieces of information to make a decision on whether this variance should be granted or denied.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'd like to ask panel for their questions. Any questions? Mr. Baltz?
I guess to planning staff, would these be required for the building permit? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Would you please repeat the question, please?
So Mr. Jalkowski has said that the studies that PRED wishes to requires for this, the environmental impact study and the slope stability report, would be required for the issuance of a building permit. And I'm wondering if that's true, and if it is, should we not consider the height variance today and have that be part of building permit?
Mr. Chair, I've verified this with our environmental planner, who has taken a look at this and confirmed that it's a natural heritage feature and it's copyright and forested. So he confirmed that the application for minor variance will need to demonstrate that the proposal will not have a negative impact on the feature, slope, and the forest. So therefore, the EIS should have been provided with the application. So
Thank you. Ms. McLean, any questions?
Thank you. Just to follow up to, thank you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up to the city planner along the lines of the agent, if there was no height variance required today, how would these studies be required?
Mr. Chair, I imagine this since it came for a minor variance, and we are certain that they have plans to build building on this natural heritage feature, then this is the only opportunity that you have to request that, to require that, those studies.
Okay. Ms. Wright, do you have any comments? No, Mr. Barrett? Okay. So I'd like to ask the panel for if they would like to hear this application today. All those in favor to hear this application, please raise your hands. Okay, all those that do not want to hear this application and have it adjourned. All those to adjourn? One. So the application will be heard today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Now moving on to application number 3. This has to do with 614 Pesagami. And the planning department has requested this. Mr. Nadome, you are the agent for the applicant. Do you agree with this application to be adjourned?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah. I'm agreeable to the adjournment.
Okay. All right. So all those in favor of adjourning this application, please raise your hands. Panel has agreed to adjourn this and we'll adjourn it sine die, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. So your application has been adjourned sine die. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just wondered if we could request the applicant to provide an up-to-date survey when the application comes back before the hearing.
Yes, can you do that, Mr. Denome?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
So-
One's being produced currently.
Okay, and we need you to expand again on the 4 tests.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So your
Thank you.
application is adjourned sine die. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now we'll turn to the unopposed applications, and we have one unopposed application. This has to do with application number 4, having to do with 358 Cunningham. Again, Mr. Jalkotsi, if I'm saying that correctly. Are you available, sir?
I'm available.
Jalkotsi, good morning again, or good afternoon. Great, so we have an unopposed application here. Is the planning department agreeable with this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are in agreement or have no concerns apart from what
Great.
was shared in the report.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that has any opposition to this application? I note for the panel that there are no objections to this application, so I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair
So now we'll
and
go.
panel.
Now we'll move on to application number 1. This application has to do with 1568 Meadowbrook. Mr. Hume, are you available? Mr. Hume?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hume. I'd like to ask you to give us a brief description of your application today, and keep in mind there's a 5-minute time limit.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. I did provide a brief presentation or some slides to the committee. So if you could put up the first slide. This is a consent application to implement a 4-lot proposal that was subject to a zoning amendment, which was approved by City Council on May 24th, 2023. And what it does is it creates the consent application, creates 4 lots conforming to the City Council approved zoning with the companion easements, reciprocal easements to provide parking and drainage. So you can see before you, this was the site plan that was the basis upon which the zoning was approved in May. And if you go to the next one, you'll see the reference plan. We're creating, as we say, 4 lots with in the rear. If you look at part 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll see that we're separating them into 4 lots. Part 2 and part 3 will provide reciprocal easements for transportation and pedestrian activity to parking spots between the building. Parts 10 and 11 provide reciprocal easements that provide a pedestrian access to the rear units. And that arrangement is mirrored for parts 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now in the middle, there is a drainage easement. You can see parts 17, 18, 19, and 20. Those are reciprocal easements for drainage from the rear of the property to the front of the property, in accordance with the drainage plans that were provided to the city in support of the rezoning application. So if I can go to the next slide, the request to the committee is to create the 4 lots and provide the easements that bring into effect the parking, pedestrian access, and drainage for the proposed development. And Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation to you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the panel for any questions they may have. Mr. Baltz?
So in the long summary that was provided to us, the easements were different. So I'm one, not the drainage easements, but the actual car and pedestrian easements. Have those changed since the circulation?
So yes, they have. They've actually gotten bigger. What happened was the easements were originally provided on the basis of just the asphalt. And at a request from the city, we expanded those easements to include both the asphalt and the pedestrian activity and the pedestrian pathway that exists to the right of the to the right. Well, I guess it's the right end to the left of the proposal. If you go back to the site plan, we can just. Not the reference plan, the site plan. If you see, you can see the 2.44 dimension at the very front, Mr. Baltz there. So what we did is we adjusted that the easement or the pole to reflect that 2.44 dimension. Originally it was 1.5, reflecting only the requirement for the minimum requirement for, or the maximum requirement, sorry, for the driveway.
May I follow up? So I'd like, through you, Mr. Chair, to ask planning if the new easements as presented here are have been checked and are correct.
Yes, Mr. Chair, yes, they have been checked and correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
You have any questions, Ms. McLean?
No.
Okay, any questions, Ms. Wright? Mr. Barrett? Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the planning department for their comments with respect to this application.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Hume provided a good explanation of the application, and along with my colleague Lucy, who took care of the zoning bylaw amendment and who was well aware of this application. We've looked at it, and then with confirmation from the engineer that they've addressed all the issues for now.
Okay, thank you. Any
Yes.
questions, Ms. Wright? Mr. Barrett, any questions? No. Ms. McLean, any questions? Mr. Baltz, any questions? Back to you, Mr. Hume, with one more thing. Are you aware of the conditions that are being placed on this application if approved today?
Yes, I am, Mr.
And do you
Chairman.
agree with each of them?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Okay, and I'd like to ask anybody, any of the registered speakers from the public, if they've got any comments or questions. I note that we have no comments or questions from the public. So at this time, I'd like-
Mr. Chair, we do have a speaker online,
Do we? Okay,
Mr. Setti.
thank you. Hello, Mr. Setti.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and the panel. Just wanted to voice my opinion on it as in favor for the application. Our neighborhoods do need densification, and given the current state of the property, I think the proposed plan is in accordance to the direction that the neighborhood could go into.
Great, thank you very much, sir. So at this time, I'd like to just inform the applicant that we'll be reserving our decision today, and you will receive that decision in writing within 10 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Okay. Now we're moving on to application number 2. Mr. Jalkotzi. I hope I'm saying that correctly, sir. Mr. Jalkotzi. Are you available?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. I'd like to ask you to please provide us with a brief summary of your application today, and remind you that we have 5 minutes, or you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a presentation. This is slide 1, so it indicates the location of the site. It's in the neighborhood of Rothwell Heights. This is a very heavily treed, and if you look to the top left or right side of the property and all along that all is a very large escarpment. It is definitely an environmental feature, and it as well is a significant slope. And next slide, please. The proposed home is reasonably close to the property, to the front property line. If you're looking at the property right now, what you see on your right is the rear yard setback line, which is quite considerable. The entire lot is over 100 meters deep in terms of its depth. So the house is actually on the very front side. Majority, if not all, of the major trees are being retained. There is a tree report and a tree planting plan associated with this property. Because of the way the bylaw is written, the average height is taken at the rear property setback line. Well, you'll note the 70.46 meters and 76.69 meters in elevation. And at the front yard setback, which is a 5 meter setback. The property at that level up to about the middle of the building is fairly level and then drops off behind that. Next slide, please. So when we went through and did the calculations, you'll see that this is the grading, and you'll see the various slopes. And effectively along that hedge line is where the embankment starts going down. And so the house is placed at the edge of the embankment, and no doubt building permit and will be requiring a slope stability assessment, and as well will definitely require the environmental impact study. I think that's about it. So the height of the building, based on the calculation done under the zoning bylaw definition, would not permit a building of just about 1 story in height rather than the normal 2 stories. And the building as it stands when viewed from the street, as staff quite rightly identify, is a normal 8-meter high building as required under the bylaw. I can't remember if I have another slide here at the moment. Is there another slide? No. Yes, this is the information and gives you an idea of the depth of the lot from the architectural plans. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now would like to ask the panel if they have any questions for you. Ms. Wright. Mr. Barrett. No, I don't. Okay. Ms. McLean. And Mr. Pauls. No questions. Great, thank you. I'd now like to ask planning for their comments with respect to this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can only maybe reiterate that in EIS and slope stability are not required at building permit stage, and so that this is the it's not conforming with the official plan, and we think that this is the only opportunity where we can require these studies, because they are not required at the building permit stage.
To you, Mr. Lagasore, I noticed that there's only one condition if this application is to be considered today, and the application is only that the variance is tied to the plans that were filed on June the 15th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Jakowski, you're aware of that one condition?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I would now like to ask the public, is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment today on this application? I note that there are no comments from the public.
Mr. Chair, we do have a speaker online.
Do we? Okay.
Mr. Stefanos.
Oh,
Mr. Stepanos.
oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Chairman. I didn't realize that I'm a speaker, but anyway, we live across the street from the lot. And we do not oppose this development. In fact, my only concern around this, that we have 3 abandoned lots in a row on this area. And it negatively affects the neighborhood. And in a sense, we would support any reasonable compromise to get it well maintained and properly addressed. That's basically what we're about to say. I'm not sure that I understand the comment of planning department, but I'll leave it up to you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Now, if there are no further comments, I'd like to let the panel know and the applicant that we will be reserving this decision, and you will receive the decision within 10 days, a written decision of our deliberations today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and panel. Thank you.
All right, now moving on to application number 4. Or did we already? No, application 4, we've already passed that one. On to application number 5. And application number 5 has to do with 469 Edgeworth. Mr. Segreto, are you available? Mr. Segreto. Mr. Segreto, are you available?
Yeah.
We don't see you yet. Good afternoon, sir.
There we are. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Would you please give us a brief description of your application today, and recognizing that you have 5 minutes to do that?
Yeah, if we can go to the PowerPoint, I can take you through it. So, Mr. Chair, panel members, what I have in front of you here today is an application for severance in order to construct a new 2-story semi-detached dwelling, and I will need the following variances. The variances that I'm looking for today are for lot width, for lot area, and for a front-facing garage. I can go through the variances with you if you'd like, or we can, they're on the board right there. So basically, to reduce the lot width from 9 meters to 7.62, to permit a reduced lot area of 231.9 square meters, whereas the bylaw requires 270 square meters, and to permit a front-facing detached garage, whereas the bylaw states that the front-facing garage is not permitted of the outcome of the streetscape analysis. So that is basically very similar for both sides of the severance in front of you. Next page, please. So what we have here, the star indicates where the subject property is. The blue items are basically semi-detached dwellings that are in the neighborhood and on the street. Next page, please. This was the streetscape analysis that we have in front of you. As you can see where the star is, that's the subject property. The red outlines are buildings that have garages, and there's a fair amount of them. Directly beside us, there is a house with a garage, and the other house next to that has a garage as well. On the right-hand side, you can clearly see that they have garages in the back. They're not in front or attached garages, but there is a mixture in there. You can clearly see that there are some across the street and a few more down the road. Next page, please. So these are the photographs that we have taken. 880 Edgeworth, which has a front-facing garage. 886 Edgeworth, which has a front-facing garage. 888, again, front-facing garage. Then 465 Edgeworth has a garage as well. 491 has a garage attached as well. And then 503 Edgeworth. So there is a mixture in there. And I believe that that variance is something that is not a major thing or a major effect or any. It fits in with the neighborhood and with the lot fabric of the area, in my opinion. Next page, please. That is the subject house. You can clearly see that the house on the left-hand side is a bungalow with a attached garage. And then you can see at the other side, there's a semi there, but the garage is a detached garage, and it does go to the back of the property. These are houses that were built probably 50 years ago or so. Times have changed now. There's a lot of change in this area. A lot of the semis that are being presented are with attached garages. Next page, please. This is my proposal that I have. This is a perspective of it. It's a fairly standard, straightforward semi-detached dwelling. We don't need any other variances for soft landscaping or anything like that. I believe there's 2 trees that do have to be removed from the property. They are city trees, and I think we have permission to remove those trees and to replace them with new trees. Next page, please. And these are the trees that I was discussing. The ones in yellows that are marked X will be removed. And if you go to the next page, you'll see that we'll have replacement trees there with the yellow ones that are off to the side. And I think that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Segreto, are you familiar with the conditions on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I went through them all and I'm pretty good with them. I did read them all, yes.
And so you accept them?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask panel for questions or comments. Mr. Barrett? No questions. Ms. Wright? No. Mr. Baltz?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. What percent of the facade width would these garages be taking up on each of the units?
You're probably looking just a little bit less than half. I'd say maybe 45%. Like if you're looking at each half, 50% of it would be 55% of it would be probably the front door off to the side, but the other 45% of it would be, I would say, would be the garage itself. But I don't think we have an oversized garage. It's just a single car garage, and I believe it's an 8 or 9 foot in width for that garage.
Thank you. Ms. McLean, any questions? No. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the planning department for their comments on this application.
Hello, Mr. Chair. So I have no concerns with variances A, B, D, and E for reduced lot width and area. However, I do have some concerns with variances C and F to permit the attached front-facing garage. The dominant streetscape character analysis that was done for this, given the property is located within the mature neighborhoods overlay, has stated that the dominant character is no front-facing attached garage. I believe that 12 did not feature front-facing attached garages of the 21 properties surveyed, including the subject property. And as part of its, the official plan and the zoning bylaw are intended to maintain the character. Well, I should say specifically, the zoning bylaw is intended to have the character maintained of the street. And since the application is proposing a feature which is not part of the dominant character, it's staff's opinion that it does not meet the intent. I would like to further note with this one that that parking is not required for the site given its location in area X on schedule 1A. So they don't necessarily have to provide parking if they cannot provide it if in the rear or another parking configuration. Staff had suggested through pre-consultation with the applicant that they could also, reconfigure the design by insetting the first story to make sure that they don't have front-facing garages. So, and then I'll just tie it off with the official plan states that the form characteristics for neighborhoods in the inner urban area consists of no automobile parking or limited parking concealed from the street.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to make some comments on this? Oh, sorry, I should really ask the rest of the panel if they have any comments. Mr. Baltz? Or sorry, questions? No, Ms. McLean? All right. Ms. Wright? No questions. I'd like to ask the public if they have any questions or comments to make on this application. I know we don't have any registered speakers, so there's no questions or comments from the applicant, from the public. I'd like to ask Mr. Segreto if you'd like to make some comments with respect to those last presentations.
Yes, I would. With respect to what the planner has said, I understand that she is talking about policy, but you have to look at the proposal that I do have in front of you here today. The proposal is for a semi-detached dwelling. Yes, I guess what we could do is what we could do with the semi-detached is have a carport, but a carport in this environment, in this country that we have, is not really practical. With this particular design, you can clearly see that it works with the single car garage. And she also indicated that parking is not required. Well, whoever buys a house nowadays has at least 1 or 2 cars. It doesn't make sense to me. So rather than having front yard parking or anything like that, we have a garage where we can put where we can't put the car and where we can put bicycles and garbage or whatever. I just feel that this is a much better fit. And this is why my clients would like to develop this property in a 2-story semi-detached dwelling with a single car garage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel one more time if they've got any questions or comments for any of the presenters. Mr. Baltz, Ms. McLean, Ms. Wright? No. Mr. Barrett? No questions or comments. So thank you very much for your presentations, everyone. We will reserve our judgment on this application and you will be notified in writing within 10 days.
Thank you so much.
Now, we're going to move on to application number 6, and I'm going to ask Mr. Baltz to please excuse himself from this as he has a conflict.
Which one is it?
So we are dealing with application number 6 having to do with 1919 and 1967 Riverside Drive. Mr. Freeman, are you available?
I'm available online, but my colleague Brian will be presenting in person.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freeman. Could you please state your name and your address, sir?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Brian Casagrande. I'm with FO10 Planning and Design. I believe you have our address.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to make a brief presentation on this application, and note that we have 5 minutes for the application presentation.
Certainly, I do want to point out that Thomas, as well as I believe Ms. Aird and the architect for this file, Richard Hammond, are all on the call, or they're supposed to be. What you have before you is a development by Schlegel Villages, where they're proposing to develop a seniors retirement community. And it will include an 8-story, 256-bed long-term care home and an adjoining 15-story retirement home with 270 suites within it. We're in the final stages of the site plan approval, and I'm here today requesting relief from several provisions of the zoning bylaw to facilitate this proposed development. Generally, the variances that we would ask that if you do decide to approve the variances, that you tie them generally to the plans that we've filed, because we're in the final stages and there are some servicing details that could potentially minorly influence the plans. Basically, slide 2, you can see that this is the Riverside campus of the Ottawa Hospital, and we're dealing with the northeasternmost portion of that campus. On slide 3, you'll see the development proposal. And so the left part, the kind of bottom of the fork, so to speak, is where the long-term care element is proposed. And then in between the far right portion of the development is where the sort of common amenities are designed into the development. And then the far right is the retirement home component. And this is a tried and tested formula, if you will, of development that the Schlegels have successfully done all across Ontario. So in terms of the minor variances that we're seeking on slide 4, I'd like to state, I guess, that the development does comply with the vast majority of the zoning provisions, the intent as well of the minor institutional zone. However, to facilitate the development, we require relief from 5 different performance standards. So the first would be, and illustrated on the plan, is number 1. It's basically the front yard setback of the building. The average setback will meet the required setback, but instead of chamfering the building or angling it, it was desired to seek the minor variance for that small corner of the building. Secondly, on the top of the page, you'll see a number 2, which indicates a green landscaped area. Normally, these landscape buffers are supposed to, when they're adjacent to parking like this, are supposed to be 3 meters in width. This landscape buffer is sought to be reduced to 2.7 meters. And then we have 3 other variances. The number 3 relates to the parking aisle width. Generally, throughout the plan, you see parking aisle widths that range between 6 and the required 6.7 meters. I think it's important for the committee to understand that the 6 is actually, excuse me, a standard requirement for residential development, but for other uses such as this, the requirement is increased. We've generally tried to keep those reduced aisles to the areas on the southern or the bottom part of the site, which is predominantly where staff parking is going to be accommodated. And then number 4 is seeking some reduced parking spaces. And these are specifically in area number 4, where you've basically got a situation where the zoning bylaw requires a certain percentage of your parking spaces to be reduced. But this particular area is the area that kind of pushes us just beyond the threshold of reductions. Again, most of those reduced parking spaces are oriented towards the staff parking areas. And it's important actually to point out that if we actually reduce 3 spaces from this sort of bottom part of the plan, our percentages would shift into conformance and we wouldn't need that variance. And then finally, there's a loading space aisle you can see in number 5 that loading space exists for that building there today. It's actually non-compliant relative to the zoning bylaw because the bylaw will require 2 spaces, whereas it has 1. So it preserves that right, but in orienting the loading space in a different manner, as you can see with that blue bar, it's just under the required minimum width for a loading space, which is 9 meters. So again, we could have eliminated, which would amount to probably 1 or 2 parking spaces and have enough width. But the general objective for the Schlegels on this property is to try and get as close to what their normal minimum standards are for these types of developments. And so really these variances are predominantly focused on maximizing efficiency of the parking layout of the property. You have our planning rationale, which details the Planning Act considerations, in particular the official plan, but I'm available to answer any of your questions related to the presentation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask panel if they have any questions. Ms. Wright, Mr. Barrett. Okay, we'll come back to you. Ms. McLean.
Thank you. Could you just explain the variance E for the east parking lot? I wonder if we could just put that site plan. You indicated that if you reduced the parking by 3 spaces, you would comply. I wasn't just clear on that.
Yeah, if we can bring that slide back up, I think it was maybe 5 or 4. I think it's the next one. Yes. So what's illustrated there, Ms. McLean, is number 4 is where we're seeking some variances to have reduced parking space sizes. But what the reality is that on any development like this, you have a certain number of cars, up to, I believe it's 50%, that are permitted by the bylaw to be reduced in size. And so I was asking the question of my colleagues, because they've been sort of stick handling this minor variance application largely. Well, how many would we have to actually eliminate as parking spaces to get above the 50% threshold? And the answer I got back was 2 from east parking lot number 1 and 1 from east parking lot number 2, because what it would do is 2 things. It would allow those spaces to be spread more, and therefore the width variances on some of them would go away. And then the percentage, as I mentioned, would drop below the 50% or at the 50% mark. So the point I'm trying to make really is that these variances most of them are so close to the threshold of the zoning bylaw. And our goal really was just to try and maximize parking in the areas where it was going to be most efficient and least impactful. So the focus has been on a lot of these reduced spaces to be where parking staff, where their staff would park, and of course would have a regular appreciation for, you know, the reduced standards compared to some of the other lots, such as where you see right below the existing medical facility. There's no reductions proposed for those parking spaces, and more modest reductions proposed for the parking aisles. And then similarly, along the face of you can see the sort of long stretch of the main building, that entire parking lot in front of the building, again, has no reductions that are being pursued, as well as the pretend south is down for a minute. So the bottom half where it actually says west parking lot, that whole band of parking also is fully compliant. So for the most part, the orientation of these variances has been where the general public and the users of the facility are not going to be needing it. And where they are sought, they'll of course be signed to indicate that these are for short car parking spaces, for example.
So if I understand you correctly, then if you took out 3 parking spaces from all the lots?
No, from East Lot 1 and East Lot 2. So 2 from the first and 1 from the second. That change would allow the spaces to be spread enough. And as I mentioned, the count of number of spaces would go down, and therefore the variances for those spot reductions would disappear. In other words, variance number 4 would disappear.
So the 50% is over those 2 lots, the 50%.
It's specifically,
allowance.
yes, it's specifically labeled to 4 because we had to pick a place to seek the variance. But generally speaking, the 50% covers the whole development. So because we have like a certain number that, like, I'm gonna guess, Ms. McLean, it's maybe 53% of the spaces that are above the 50% threshold. What we're saying is that if we actually eliminated 2 in that area, that's the area where the variance is being sought. Does that make sense?
I think it clarifies it for
Okay.
me. Was there any consideration given to reducing the landscape buffer for that east parking lot to allow a longer parking space length?
Yes, but the parking spaces in under number 4 are reduced in width and length. So you'd fix one of the potential compliance issues, but you wouldn't fix the other unless, of course, we're eliminating some parking spaces to avoid it. The other challenge with that landscaped area that you're talking about there is we're dealing with a slope issue as well as a safety wall that's being erected for the train concerns. And so my worry, and the architect might be on here to confirm for you, is that where you would normally want to eliminate that, we have to actually deal with a bit of sloping, and then there might be concern that cars could bump up against that wall. So it's a little bit of kind of tight quarters, but to your point, that whole area actually has the benefit of that extra landscape area. So if the landscape area isn't graded up to deal with slope issues, those cars can actually park a little deeper in there, which will inherently provide more space on the other side of the aisle. So even though we're tackling it this way from a practical perspective, I'm sure we're going to seek to try and reduce that landscape area as much as possible for that.
And the other area I'm struggling with is the parking lot in front of the existing medical building.
Yes.
And how the delivery trucks have to navigate through that parking lot with reduced aisles.
Yes.
So
we have a concept, I think it's in the slide deck a little further down, because we were analyzing that a little bit in the last few days, but we'll see.
and I think I saw that, but what type of delivery vehicle are we talking about?
So this is what I was going to actually point out with that slide is, I don't think we have it here, or maybe we do. Oh, it's looking positive. There it is. Okay. So you'll notice, Ms. McLean, that we've actually, it's a slight adjustment from the plan that you saw, which we're going to seek with the final site plan. But what we've done is we've kind of nibbled into the surrounding landscape islands that you would have saw in the other plan to allow the northern half under where it says medical building to actually slide to the right a little bit. And therefore, we're really now only nibbling at the corner of that one parking space that you're seeing under NG. And this whole turning template is actually based on a size of delivery truck that exceeds what would normally be expected to be delivered. And the last important consideration is most of those deliveries actually occur outside of the normal clinic operator or the medical building operating hours with it. So therefore, in the event you had a truck that's this big, in the event that you had a concern with the one space, which is NG, you would probably have an empty parking lot in which they're navigating.
And could I ask the city planning, or do you want me to wait? Could I just ask city planning if the transportation or the traffic or the analysis has been done on this loading bay space and that the city's comfortable with this?
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. There has been some back and forth with our transportation project manager, and this last iteration was reviewed and she was comfortable with what was amended and updated with. So this is the last iteration that we saw and they were comfortable with it.
Thank you. And just one last question. We're dealing with this as one complete parcel, one lot. If the proposed lease comes to the committee, will that impact any of the zoning implications that we're dealing with, or will a lease, long-term lease, impact zoning requirements?
No, it won't. That's a good question, though. I don't know that we're scheduled to be back here. Thomas may actually know about that, because I know that there's been discussion about whether you'd have a what's it called, a full lease across the whole property, which doesn't, as I understand it, require committee approval. But Thomas, do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, there are currently discussions between the Ottawa Hospital and Schlegel Villages to determine the area of lease. So a draft reference plan is being prepared to show the areas where Schlegel Villages will have the long-term lease, and services will be shared services will be addressed through the easements. There's no zoning compliance issues. We've gone through the zoning bylaw, and we have determined that there's no zoning compliance issues with the long-term lease as proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one more comment about the size of trucks. What do they deliver with now? 5 tons, 1 tons, panel vans, semi.
You have me at a loss, Mr. Chair. Thomas, have you heard any discussions about the type of trucks?
I think for the most part, it's the small vans for the life labs for picking up blood samples. That's mostly what occurs right now, and they're small miniature vans. The only thing would be garbage collection, but because currently it's right there, but that medical building also has a connection through to the hospital where there is a larger loading dock as well, where garbage and compactor. So in the event that it's reoriented, the garbage can be go out through the hospital building.
Thank you. Any comments, Mr. Barrett, or questions, please?
Yes, I'm just asking the question with regards to, through you, Mr. Chair, staff parking. Have staff been part of this proposal or been informed of this proposal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that they've been consulted on the design of the layout. We have the architect here. I don't know that that's commonplace for them to be consulted, but he may be able to shed some insights as to whether he's aware of any discussions that in that regard. Richard, are you here? Maybe not. I texted him, but because he wanted to join.
The design has been throughout the design. It's Thomas speaking, but the design has been. Oh, here's Richard. He's just joining now, but the design has been discussed with the Ottawa Hospital and their staff.
Is this a design that is very similar to the others that this developer has developed across the province?
Very much so, but I believe Richard would be an expert to actually answer that.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. This design is a model that we've done with Schlegel Villages, about a dozen locations now across Ontario. And they do extensive consultation with their operations team, not only on the design of the building itself, but the organization, the site, outdoor space, access to parking, drop off. So it is very representative of the work that we've done.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Any further questions?
So in your consultation with planning at the Ottawa Hospital, is it have you included the staff parking for the entire site or just for the new proposed site?
My understanding is that the staff parking that I was talking about on that side, the bottom of the page, if you will, adjacent to the rail line, that's staff parking for the facility that's being built. So we're taking away a certain amount of parking spaces that exist now for the Ottawa Hospital in general, but there's of course many being retained, and they're satisfied that the retained amount is sufficient to satisfy their needs. Is that your question? Okay.
Just a comment through you, Mr. Chair, is that there's a significant parking requirement on the site as it is today, and the future expansion of the site is going to make things tighter for sure. Thank you.
Yes, it's understood. I mean, I think this all goes hand in hand with the city's interest, and I believe these proponents' interest in utilizing the transit systems as much as they can. And so certainly the shift we're going in, we're well beyond the minimum zoning requirement for this development. And we're actually trying to, put as much as we can on there without creating operational issues. So it's about striking that balance at the end of the day. The other positive thing, I think, is that this is being built in phases, right? So the retirement home component is second. I believe some of the parking is being retained until they get to that point. So we're going to be that much further down this sort of, reality of transition to transit and so on. And hopefully these demands align well with what the supply is.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Is there an underground parking garage to be built in either of these sites?
Yes, underneath the retirement home building, there is an underground parking. And, we're working to try and make sure that that has as much as possible in there as well. And I suppose if they felt like it was substantially below their threshold, they could look at increasing the depth of that underground parking. But as Richard's alluded to, like there is a really tried and tested sort of range, if you will, for these developments that the client has seen over time meets their minimum. And I can tell you that as we moved through this application process, through the site plan, nibbling away at different things to accommodate the pathway and so on, there was constant paranoia about this site dropping below that threshold. So right now it's in a comfortable spot for the client.
Just a question about safety and maybe the firefighting accesses, as well as so that in part two of the parking lot area, that parking lot would exit out to Riverside South. It has no ability to exit onto Smythe Road, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so is the traffic plan, has that been done to I know we're getting more on site plan, but is it something that has been analyzed as well?
Absolutely. Through that site plan process, the city circulated all their normal departments, including fire and emergency services, as well as their own transportation experts. And we have ours, and they've all determined that they're comfortable with the design.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd like to move on to the planning department and see if planning would make some comments on this application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have too much to add apart from the report that I was submitted. I did see some confusion, possibly that led to some frustration from members of the public and through conversations that I've had with them regarding parking. The applicant is providing more than 100 spaces than what is required on the lot today for the use. I understand some of those spaces, or all those spaces, are existing today, and some of them will be removed for the proposed project. However, the variances at hand do not speak to the number of parking spaces required. It's more so, as the applicant has explained, it's more so for the number of compact parking spaces. So the way we just looked at it was 50% of the compact car parking spaces are permitted in a parking lot, and the parking lot 4, they're looking to have them all compact car parking spaces. However, on the grand scheme of things, with the amount provided, there is less than 50% of them that would be compact car spaces. So just a bit of clarification, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Ms. Wright, any questions for Mr. Barrett? Ms. McLean? Okay, I have no further questions either. Now I'd like to ask some members of the public if they have any questions for the applicant. And I believe we have 1, 2, 3 persons, either in person or remotely. First, I'll take the remote person. Janet Johnston, are you available? Oh, you're here in person. Come on down. Is the green button pushed? Yep. Could you just state your name and your address for the record?
My name is Janet Johnston and I live at 1901 Norwood Avenue in Alta Vista.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, I just want to remind you that you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. In addition to that, we have to stick with the 4 tests as it relates to the variances being requested. So we need to stay with just those those variances, please.
Can I, okay, thank you. First of all, can I just check? I did send something last week and then I sent an addendum earlier this morning. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Was that the one that you sent at 10:09 this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, as you can see from what I've written, my focus is primarily on the parking. I understand that in terms of total numbers, the parking is adequate, but I do think that there's some issues in terms of how this is really going to work. I mean, I think, we have to consider the reality of how extensively the parking on the subject lands is already in use, contrary to the pictures that were submitted by the applicant, which were taken after business hours. I have since sent pictures showing the amount of usage on the lot during business hours. And as I say, we're talking about width and so on and so forth, but the reality is, where is all this going to go when you compound the use of the site by the addition of these enormous long-term care and retirement homes?
Now, ma'am, I just want to focus your arguments. They should be relating to the 4 tests as it relates to this variance.
Well, I'd say that the effect of parking, the effect of what is being proposed on parking demands of the site is not minor in nature.
Okay.
But in fact, is very significant. And I think if this is not taken seriously, we are going to have a disaster in terms of parking. I can think of different retirement homes around, like a mother living in a retirement home. I can think of retirement homes around the city where there's really not adequate visitor parking on site. But these are located on relatively quiet residential streets where there's all kinds of on-street parking available, including where my mother lives now at Oak Park in Alta Vista. Anyone who's familiar with that will know there are a number of streets there. There's no problem with parking. This, in contrast, is facing 2 very busy streets, Riverside Drive, Smythe Road, where it's impossible to park, as we know. The third side, you have the railway track. And then, as I realized after sending my first submission, Sarah Billings Place to the south also has no parking between 7 a.m., 7 p.m., 7 days a week. Some of Norwood Avenue already has restricted parking, 1 hour, and so on. I think there's going to be a huge problem. I think this expectation that people are going to be taking rapid transit when they're visiting loved ones in long-term care and retirement homes is frankly not realistic. My mother's in her 90s. I'm in my late 60s. I was a keen rider on OC Transpo earlier in my life, but nowadays I take a car, and not least because I'm transporting things. I need to carry big items, and I'm not going to be on the rapid transit. I think that's got to be taken into consideration. I gather that the city implemented this, is it a bylaw? At any rate, the 300 meter, if you're within 300 meters of a rapid transit station, there's a reduced requirement for parking. I would submit, I realize this isn't something for you directly to deal with, but I do think this is being unrealistic in terms of the usage that you're going to see at a long-term care home and a retirement home. And as I say, in this particular case, there isn't the fallback of adjacent residential streets, or even to get to Norwood Avenue where I live will involve a huge walk through the Riverside campus, across the railway tracks and back, which again, for the people who are going to these, as visitors anyway, to these facilities is going to be a big problem.
You have 1 minute left, ma'am.
Okay, as has been, okay, so one more thing quickly about the allowance for the medical center. I'm not quite clear, but talking about reducing something from 9 meters to 6 meters. This is the roadway access, is that right? That does not seem to me to be a small, how is it described? As just, you know, anyway, that seems to me to be pretty significant as well and not a minor variance in nature. And finally, I'd just like to say how gobsmacked we all were to find out about the reversionary covenant on the land only very recently, after being assured all the way through this process that basically there was nothing to be done, that it was an as of right application and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Frankly, as a citizen of the city of Ottawa, I'm really appalled that it was only, last week that we learned about this. The parties, obviously, the hospital, the city were fully aware of this.
I think that's something you should take up with your counselor. They would be the best person to make sure that you're informed. Thank you very much for your presentation, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now I have Jean Carr. Are you here? Or Jean? Mr. Carr, would you please state your name and your address, please?
My name is Jean Carr. I reside at 133 Balmoral Place.
Thank you.
In Ottawa.
Mind you, sir, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and please try to give new information for the panel.
Right. So I believe you have a document that I submitted yesterday, and I'd just like to go over or highlight some aspects of that document.
Absolutely.
As they relate to what did you call them, sir? The four
tests.
Four tests. First, so we oppose the variances because this has come out as a result of closed process. This development come up closed process secured with large negative effects on the community. Essentially, the variances which are requested make the in some make this a major variance. They're not minor. It is our contention that that they're omitting some very important parts in their application, and we'll go through those in a minute. So, as a point of departure, when we last met 2 weeks ago, you had asked about the secretive aspect of the process, and in my document to you in section 1, I highlight the process from November 2020 when the Ontario government announced funding for this, and the community only found out about it in June 2022. We had no opportunity for input at all for the process. When we met with the proponent a few weeks ago, you had asked that we exchange our concerns with them. They told us their concerns about the variances, but they would not hear what our concerns were. I offered that we meet last week, and they did not want to meet. They don't care about what the community does or thinks here. From what we can decipher, there's a financial prize of $81 million for them if they get this through, and I think that's what they're going for, and they're not taking into consideration at all how the community might be hurt. So in terms of whether this development would be desirable for the community, I can just speak to 133 Balmoral Place. And somehow I feel this is like a victim impact statement and not rather than something else. Essentially, the damages this is a huge development which would materially affect our lifestyle, our neighborhood, our homes for basically a long time. If we had a choice, we'd want them to go ahead with this project, but make it much smaller. And the variances that they've asked for are actually enabling variances for a huge project, which frankly, if they want this huge, they should place it somewhere else. And if they want to do it on this land, they should essentially just take it down. Instead of 500 or 7 new beds, make it 300 or some other number. So that the damages to our home are, we're going to have a complete loss of privacy. We're going to have a 15-story tower right next to us, with conceivably the majority of 135 people on one side being able to look in our yard, our kitchen, our living room, our bedroom. We're basically our privacy will be gone. In addition to that, there's about a dozen homes of our immediate neighbors who will face the same situation. The residents will be able to look into our homes and our lack of privacy. We will lose significant amount of sunlight on our award-winning gardens. And this is all detailed in my document to you. After the derecho last year, I proceeded to get quotes to get solar panels on our home. And the quote came in about a week before this project was revealed publicly. And the solar company that clearly wants to make a profit and wants to get a new installation said, don't do your solar panels, because this tower is going to negate that. It will no longer be economically viable. I was trying to get confirmation of that through sitting down with the proponent and or the city, and nobody has agreed to meet with me to discuss it. But maybe it's because it's simple as there's no solution. They're going to block the sun on our house. The solar panels are gone. Our real estate agents that we consult with have said that you can with this 15-story building, a few feet from our home, with a mass it has, expect to lose 15% of property value on resale. So that's how we're going to be affected.
1 minute, sir.
Okay. I'll rush ahead to other elements, but the key one, if I have 1 minute left, is if you look at the city's urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings, there's a number of omissions I feel that are not in the proponent's application. I think they're trying to slide something through. The angular plane requirement of their building that they've submitted does not show any mechanical rooms or elevator shafts on top of the building. So they might be in violation of the angular plane requirement. Don't know that they are. They didn't provide information to prove that they are conforming.
30 seconds, sir.
The next parts of page 8 of the building design guidelines and page 10 and page 12 itemize how the towers need to be progressively growth. There has to be scaling, but we're faced here with a huge tower right next to us. As a matter of fact, page 15 says the maximum height of a bar building should be 12 stories. And that's clearly in the design guidelines. Yeah, they're putting up a 15-story building. And I'll go one step further than that. It says, or it should be 1.5 times the width of the street faces. Well, 1.5 times the width of the railway line is they should probably just be allowed to build an 8 or 9-story building.
Need you to wrap up now, sir.
Yeah. So what I sent to you includes ideas that the community put together that they did not want to talk about in terms of relocation. I encourage you to look at the video that's provided. So in summary, the building plans were done in secret process. There's a complete failure, lack, or desire on the part of proponent to engage with the community. The project design is not compatible with the neighborhood. It's just too darn big. The current plan will have a dramatic negative effect on many properties in terms of loss of privacy, damaging award-winning gardens, solar power installations, quiet enjoyment, loss of property value. The sum of the requested variances make this a major variance. The omissions related in the city operating plan in the proponent's submission are very telling. The proposed development is clearly not compliant with a large number of city high-rise guidelines that you find in that document.
Thank you very much, sir.
That's it.
Thank you. And we have one more person that has suggested they would like to speak. Suzanne Carr, are you available?
She does want to.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for me or?
Does the panel have any questions? Ms. McLean? That's right. Mr. Barrett? No? Okay, thanks. No, sir, thank you very much for your presentation. Now I'd like to ask the applicant to have the, if you'd like to make some comments, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to respond to just some of the comments that were raised. Firstly, I think a lot of the residential concern or the residents' concerns that you heard are really issues that have to do with the existing zoning that's in place and perhaps even best funneled through the site plan approval process. I mean, at the end of the day, the variances relative to the concerns about parking supply, the variances, as I mentioned, that are being sought are actually going to increase the parking supply on the site versus if we didn't achieve those variances, we'd have less parking. And so in my mind, it's actually going to aggravate the concern if in fact the concern is legitimate. And as city's planner pointed out, we're exceeding the minimum requirements by over 100 spaces. I wanted to clarify with respect as well for the loading space. The key question there is it navigable? We've analyzed that. The city's comfortable with that. Again, if we had to actually make it 9 meters wide instead of 6, well, we'd be eliminating some parking spaces to do so. And I think that runs counter to these concerns. I guess the last things I'd want to point out is this notion of a closed process I have some issue with. We did have 2 meetings with the community thus far. There's been letters and correspondence between those neighbors. And the categorization that we actually didn't hear or didn't want to hear the current concerns from Mr. Carr during that meeting is actually a complete lie. We asked them right at the beginning, can we hear what your concerns are? And at the end of the meeting, we asked them, do you have any other concerns? And they actually refrained to provide us with the remaining concerns. So all we can do is ask and respond, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now you step down here, Mr. Carr. You'd like to say something else?
Yeah, I think.
Press the green, please press the green button.
Yeah, the last comment really upsets me. Well, let's say we agree to disagree. We were not asked or offered to ascertain our concerns. Anyways, the point that he was trying to make again is the type of a thing that really upsets me in terms of massaging data. There's about 380 parking spaces right now on the site. And their plan calls for 300 something. There's 308 or 306. So they're reducing the parking by about 70 places. The current parking lot is essentially full most days, or 80–90% full most days. They're adding, they want to add 400, 500, 600 units, whatever the total is. Which so they're going to have 300 parking spaces to handle the current 385 plus all the new residents. That's just going to spill over completely in the neighborhood. There's no other thing that's going to happen. This project is simply too big.
Thank you, sir.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so as I said earlier, we will be reserving our judgment on this. You'll be receiving the panel's decision within 10 days in writing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
You're welcome. So that concludes our business for today. Thank you all very much for your help. And as I said, all decisions will be given in writing within the next 10 days. Thank you.